The stars had grown silent. Once teeming with trade convoys, science vessels, and diplomatic couriers, the core sectors of the galactic concord now echoed with ghost signals, distress beacons looping endlessly in the void. Whole systems blinked out of contact like dying embers. The enemy, known only as the Krasari Swarm, didn't wage war in any conventional sense. They did not negotiate. They did not respond. They did not relent. They consumed. On the floating citadel of Aegis Veritas, orbiting the last stable stronghold of the Telenari people, the High Council gathered in desperation. The chamber, a vast sphere of translucent crystal and light, hummed with the voices of 24 species, each more fractured than united. At its center stood Archon Cerex of Telenar Prime, regal, aged, and visibly exhausted. His ornate crest, once upright in ceremonial pride, now drooped low over his scaled brow. "We've lost the Eridani Bastion," he said, his voice unfiltered by translator implants. "No survivors. Not even data remnants. The swarm is adapting faster than any of our predictive matrices can calculate." The chamber rippled with unrest. A Zurich admiral slammed a clawed fist against his console. A whispering chorus from the aquatic Marathai enclave swelled into a wail. Each counselor carried the weight of a dying people. "We have no options left," muttered Counselor Veln of the Shikar enclave. "Not unless we violate Protocol Delta Sigma 7. The mention of it silenced the chamber. "You would break the quarantine?" hissed an elder from the Asta Dominion, her voice sharp and crystalline. "That world is marked forbidden for a reason." We all agreed. No contact. Veln stood. He was not tall, nor imposing, but something in his voice bore the gravity of extinction. That was before we were being erased from the stars. Before we watched our children burn. "You speak of rules written in peace. We are at war with something we cannot understand. That world, Earth, is a death world, yes. But its people have survived it, thrived in it. We need them." The council fell into grim silence. Archon Cerex turned to the chamber's AI interface. "Bring up the archive." A flicker of static filled the air, and then the projection began. Scenes from Earth's history unfolded, wars waged with terrifying fury, cataclysms endured, civilizations rebuilt from ashes. There were images of creatures native to the planet, ferocious predators, volatile environments, and finally, humanity itself. Hairless bipeds, with primitive origins and chaotic tendencies, yet unmistakably resilient. The AI concluded, Earth designated Class Omega 7. Hostile to nearly all known forms of intelligent life. Humanity, Tier 1 hyperadaptive species. Estimated conflict survivability, 98.3%. "They're monsters," whispered the Marathai envoy. "They poison their air, tame fire, tear metal from mountains, and smile while doing it." "They're survivors," Veln said quietly. "Exactly what we need." The vote passed with only 5 abstentions. The signal was composed, encrypted, and aimed toward the last recorded coordinates of Earth, which hadn't responded to galactic hails in over 2 centuries. It contained the desperate story of a galaxy undone, images of the swarm's devastation, and a single message, translated into every known human language. "If you can hear this, we are dying. We beg you, help us." Weeks passed. Some thought the message had been lost, or worse, ignored. Then, without warning, every long-range sensor across Council space went dark. Panic diagnostics revealed no system failures. The blackout was not technical, it was deliberate. An unknown encryption was overriding their comm arrays, military satellites, and deep space relays. Just as technicians scrambled to isolate the breach, the override stopped. And a single signal, clear and unadorned, filled every screen, every holodeble, every datapad. A woman's voice. Calm, precise, human. Transmission received. Response units en route. Prepare for interface. The message contained no identification, no diplomatic flourish, no reassurance. No one knew what to expect. 10 days later, the black ships arrived. They didn't descend through normal jump lanes. They appeared, silently and instantaneously, within defensive perimeters, bypassing layers of security with a kind of disdain. Their hulls were angular, matte black, unadorned by insignia. No broadcasts, no greetings. Just presence. Even the vacuum around them seemed muted, as though space itself feared to echo their engines. From one such vessel, a lone transport descended to the surface of Aegis Veritas. It landed not at a designated dock, but directly in the center of the Council Spire's summit, crushing decades-old ceremonial stonework beneath its landing struts. When the ramp extended, a squad of human soldiers emerged, 6 in all. Clad in armor that shimmered with a reactive sheen, they moved with a predator's confidence. Their eyes, visible through polarized helms, gleamed with something difficult to name. It wasn't anger. It wasn't cruelty. It was purpose. At their lead was the woman from the transmission. Her face bore the marks of hard-won survival, scars, faint burns, and eyes that did not flinch. She stopped before the council and regarded them as one might regard a map before war. "We received your plea," she said, her voice unchanged. "This is no longer your war. You are evac priority. Containment is ours." "You're sending more troops?" Serex asked, struggling to conceal the awe in his voice. "No," she replied. "We are the troops." Another silence fell, but this one different, charged, brittle. "You're only 6, Veln finally managed. Her lips curved, just slightly. "You called Deathworlders." And with that, the storm began. The air aboard the Midgard Vector was cold, not from malfunction, but design. Human ships were engineered with harshness in mind, to keep their crews alert, their bodies sharp, their instincts tuned like drawn wires. Commander Arden Voss barely noticed the chill. She stood in the observation cradle, arms crossed, her armor's matte black plating reflecting only the faintest traces of the dying stars outside. Behind her, Lieutenant Cade drifted closer, his boots magnetizing with a subtle click to the deck. His voice, as always, carried the cadence of someone who had stopped fearing consequences years ago. "Council reports say the swarm took another 4 systems. That's 37 in under half a cycle." 38, Arden corrected, without turning. Cade let out a low breath. "Right." The silence between them stretched, heavy and familiar. These were not officers born of strategy simulations or noble bloodlines. They were forged in the furnace of the Earth's worst wars, raised on continents that had stopped naming their battlefields because the dead had run out of room for monuments. When the call came, it hadn't surprised them, only that it took this long. Below them, a series of orbiting moons drifted like shattered pearls, each housing alien species that had survived by diplomacy, not defiance. Watching now as the Deathworlders organized strike teams, supply chains, and temporary command centers in less than a full cycle, the Telenari observers looked on with a mix of wonder and unease. "They're fast," muttered a young Telenari strategist, her tendrils twitching in disbelief. "No," murmured her superior. "They're relentless." On the ground, the difference was more than speed. It was method. The first joint mission was a rescue operation on Ilrix Theta, a garden world fallen silent 2 days after the swarm's arrival. The Council had assumed the population lost. The Deathworlders disagreed. 6 gunships pierced atmosphere under cover of orbital jammers. Drones deployed ahead, mapping terrain in real time. By the time Council ships reached orbit, the human teams had already breached the swarm's perimeter, executed precision strikes, extracted 4,000 survivors, and left without casualties. What remained of the swarm was a field of charred husks and craters still radiating kinetic heat. It wasn't just a victory. It was a message. Serex watched the debrief in grim awe. "They don't fight like us." "No," said Veln, standing beside him. "They fight like the universe never gave them another choice." Back aboard the Midgard Vector, Arden removed her helmet and sat quietly. Her face, weathered but not old, bore the scars of decisions few ever had to make. Across from her sat one of the Telenari liaisons, a diplomat by training, now a witness to something older than diplomacy. You don't speak of the swarm as an enemy, the liaison observed. You speak of it like weather. A force. Because that's what it is, Arden replied. It doesn't hate you. Doesn't care. It devours. And we're the firebreak. You've seen worse? No, she said, eyes darkening. But we've been worse. There was no bravado in the words. No threat. Just truth, raw and indifferent. On the swarm's frontier, in a system known only by its resource designation, RX-9, the humans made their first mistake. Not tactical, not even moral, just one of assumption. They expected fear. They thought the swarm would adapt, retreat, reroute. But the swarm for the first time noticed. On RX-9's dead moon, human scouts recovered something they hadn't encountered before, a cluster of biomechanical growths around what appeared to be a brain-like structure, larger than any seen in prior incursions. It wasn't just consuming. It was learning. Arden stood over the site, watching as the unit's AI core cataloged the find. They're starting to understand us, she muttered. Cade looked at the structure, pulsing faintly. About time. The next day, a swarm fleet emerged from a blind jump vector, an unpredictable move even by Krasari standards. It launched a direct strike at the Midgard Vector's staging zone, forcing a full-spectrum engagement. For the first time, human forces were pushed to their limits. But not past them. The ship's AI, codenamed Gungnir, deployed adaptive combat routines and auto-forged new ordnance on the fly. Ground teams shifted tactics mid-battle without command because they'd trained for chaos. They were chaos weaponized. Still, something had shifted. The swarm no longer ignored them. As night fell on the scorched plains of RX-9's second moon, Arden sat near a hastily deployed command shelter. Blood, her own, trickled from beneath her armor unnoticed. She stared upward, not at stars, but at the thin line of smoke drifting skyward, marking where a gunship hadn't returned. One of hers.
Gone.
Cade joined her wordlessly. Neither spoke. After a time, Arden broke the silence. They're changing. Cade didn't ask who. He knew. So will we, he said. Or we'll die. Arden looked at him, the faintest glimmer of a smirk on her face. We don't die easy. 1,000 kilometers away, hidden beneath the icy crust of a mining world, the swarm pulsed in silence. For the first time in its ancient history, it diverted resources to observation. It recorded patterns, cataloged reactions, dissected human corpses with interest rather than instinct. It had never encountered prey that fought back not from fear, but from fury. The Deathworlders were no longer a complication. They were a puzzle. And puzzles could be solved. The surface of Karen, 6 was ash, scorched black by atmospheric firestorms unleashed in the swarm's advance. Once a Telinari garden colony, its spires now lay broken like the bones of a long-dead god. The air shimmered with heat and electrical charge, and beneath the char, something moved. Arden Voss stood atop a shattered observation tower, eyes scanning the horizon through an augmented visor. Readouts blinked steadily in the corner of her vision. Seismic readings, ambient biosignatures, anomalous activity. Below her, teams of Deathworlder operatives moved with surgical precision, deploying seismic charges and sonic burrow disruptors. This wasn't an assault. It was a trap. The swarm was coming. They knew it. She wanted them to. A voice crackled in her comms. Recon teams in position. No contact yet, but the drone field's picking up subterranean tremors. Large ones. How large, she asked. Larger than RX-9. Maybe Command Corps scale. She tapped the side of her helmet, cycling data overlays. Good. Keep pressure tight. If they want to understand us, give them a final lesson. Behind her, Cade approached, armor scratched and dark with soot. He dropped a freshly charged plasma carbine at her feet. You planning to use words again, Commander? She knelt, checking the weapon's integrity, then rose. Not this time. They both knew this would be the endgame. Not of the war, perhaps, but of the illusion that either side could win cleanly. The humans had brought the fight, had shown the council races that the swarm could bleed. But in doing so, They had also drawn its attention fully. For the first time in its long and directionless existence, the swarm was focused. And focus made it dangerous. From the edge of the ruined city, the swarm came. Not in skittering waves as before, but in coordinated strides, towering constructs of chitin and alloy, their forms mimicking the human units they'd encountered. They had studied their enemy, absorbed human tactics, learned movement, rhythm, structure. It was mockery. Arden didn't blink. All units, Phase 1. Initiate. The field lit up with synchronized detonations, seismic charges ripping apart the earth beneath the swarm's leading edge. Massive fissures opened, swallowing entire columns of creatures. Artillery rounds followed, arcing high before raining fire and electromagnetic pulses that scrambled the swarm's networked cognition. And still, they came. Cade's squad met the enemy head-on, a brutal collision of flesh, fire, and steel. Plasma burned, blades hummed, and the air thickened with heat and screams, both mechanical and biological. Arden moved like she had on Earth, through the ruins of the Amazon offensive, through the ice storms of Arctic Command's final stand, fluid, lethal, unflinching. Every movement was calibrated, every breath reserved for purpose. Then came the shift. The ground beneath them vibrated, not from battle, but something deeper. A central mind. A signal pulse so low it barely registered on instruments, yet powerful enough to turn the tide of the swarm mid-battle. Units began falling back, not in retreat, but in unison. The swarm wasn't fleeing. It was regrouping. "Commander," came the voice of the Telenari liaison, patched through in a burst of static. "We've identified a central entity beneath the surface. It's not a command node. It's something older, possibly original, possibly sentient." Arden's jaw clenched. "Send coordinates." A flicker of light etched itself across her HUD. She turned without hesitation. "I'm going in," she said, to no one in particular. Cade intercepted her path, blood spattered across his visor, a fresh gash down his side. "You don't even know what's down there." "I don't need to," she replied. "I just need to end it." He stared at her for a moment, then passed her a thermal blade from his belt. "Don't die unless it means something." The breach point was a vertical chasm clawed open by orbital bombardment. Arden descended using a gravline, her armor's internal lights dimmed to a blood-red glow. The deeper she went, the quieter the world became, until all she could hear was her breath and the soft ping of her vitals. At the bottom it waited. Not a beast. Not even a hive. It was a shape, a consciousness bound in a construct that resembled neither machine nor life form. It pulsed with thoughts she couldn't hear, yet somehow felt. It had no eyes, no mouth, but it saw her. She stepped forward, unsure why her weapons stayed lowered. The entity shifted, patterns forming across its surface. Human patterns. Faces. Images from battle. It was trying to communicate, not with words, but impressions. Pain. Memory. Understanding. It was sentient. And curious. "Why?" she asked aloud, her voice barely audible. And in response, a single thought pierced her mind, foreign, but unmistakable. Survive. Multiply. Adapt. Repeat. It didn't hate. It simply was. A mirror of humanity's worst truths. Evolution stripped of conscience. She stared, absorbing it, and for the first time in the campaign, she hesitated. Could you kill something that didn't choose to be what it was? Then she remembered the faces on RX-9. The children pulled from the rubble. The screams trapped in burned comm logs. Her blade ignited. Above, the swarm surged, wild, uncoordinated, shrieking. Cade saw it in their movement. "She found it," he muttered. "She's doing it." The earth trembled once more. A glow, deep, brilliant, final, rose from the crater. Then silence. Minutes passed. The swarm fell motionless. One by one, the constructs collapsed, empty shells without direction. And still no signal from Arden. Not until a voice cracked through static. "Target neutralized. Confirm cleanup. Commander out." Relief crashed through the channel like thunder. Cade exhaled. In orbit, Council ships watched in stunned silence. The swarm had ended. Not everywhere, not entirely, but here, now. Broken. Deathworlders had answered. And the galaxy would never be the same.